Do you have autism? Do you love the influx of furry anime coming from Netflix recently? Because I do. And I do. And like me, you've probably heard of Beastars, the latest entry in the furry Netflix anime lineup about a functioning autistic spectrum wolf that falls in love with his high school's town bike as he tries to defy his own awkward and introverted nature, all while struggling against his own primal instincts to vor her IRL. If you haven't already unsubscribed, then buckle up, because you ain't seen nothing yet. Story. The pacing of Beastars is a little slow. So slow, in fact, that there were times I caught myself wondering just how much stuff I might have cut from this show if they hired me to direct it. The first episode cold opens into a murder mystery that's rooted in a carnivore versus herbivore struggle, kind of like Zootopia, but in high school, and everyone is fucking each other. Because of the opening, I assumed this show would have a focus on solving that mystery, though as far as I could tell there was no real resolution or even a continuation of this plotline in Season 1. The focus instead quickly turns to high school drama, bullying, and Lugosi chasing down his small bunny tsundere waifu, while being himself pursued by a member of his own species and dealing with his closeted gay roommate. There's also a play going on, and a majority of the characters are in or adjacent to the theater club, which really appears to only be used as a device for the school's alpha chad, a bossy twig-armed deer boy, to dick slap every other member of the student body. And sometimes the students' bodies. There really isn't anything much that's unique or interesting about the narrative to me. I have heard from some of my Samurai Island friends that Beastars does point out some things about Japanese high school culture and the insufferable social hierarchies that those crazy Nihongo-jin find very refreshing to see explored and talked about on television. All of this nuance and social commentary, however, is obviously lost on me, a fat American with canned ham in one hand and freedom fries in the other, living in a country free from bullying.
We're fucking Americans!
Characters. The characters in Beastars are, for the most part, also very bland and generic archetypes with very little to say or do with the story, with the exception of a few main characters whose chemistry on screen does produce an interesting dynamic. Spectrum Wolf himself is a very relatable character to people who are very socially awkward, but extremely caring, protective, and naturally helpful. Or at least to people who picture themselves that way. Somehow Gary Stu Wolf is also a master of CQC and irresistible to at least one lady and perhaps even one other male. You might have also guessed he's normally a very tolerant and passive guy until he's pushed far enough to go full Narutard, and can obviously then take on entire gangs of people with almost no help. Bunny Cocksock is the exact kind of broken girl you would expect to start the furry equivalent to an OnlyFans the day she turns 18. But she also genuinely stands up for herself in very mature, if sometimes very aggressive, ways, when she's unfairly bullied by the other girls at school because their boyfriends can't stop porking her. She isn't just some bad dragon toy because of where her broken life has left her. She is deliberately the way that she is, as a constant and appropriate fuck you to anyone else trying to confine her identity into a box that they are comfortable with. There is also Preppy Venison Boy that everyone at the school is in love with and worships for some reason that escapes me, but he's not very interesting, despite them trying to tack on some backstory about him being purchased from the equivalent of a black market furry lobster tank by a wealthy urban baron. He does, however, serve as a good conduit for information about the pressures of being at the top to the audience, and I genuinely mean that. Though he isn't very likable, there are scenes in which he is forced to make insanely difficult choices because of his station that should never be thrust upon a child of any age, like choosing between the safety of everyone at his school and the life of an individual student that has been kidnapped. There's also another wolf girl who is in love with Lugosi, but not only is she not very interesting, she's not very memorable either. Though she is sweet and loving, her entire identity in the first season is just that she pursues Lugosi, and creates a love triangle that only she seems to be aware of until much later in the season. Oh, and there's a dog that rooms with Lugosi too, who very obviously does not understand why he is having recurring dreams of Lugosi coming home drunk one night and stumbling into his bed while he's wearing women's underwear. But not only is this never explored in the first season too much, I am not even particularly certain that it was intentional. Either way, I sadly do not find myself among the audience that takes interest in such degenerate and sinful pleasures. So miss me with that gay shit. Unless it looks like this, of course. Sound. The music in Beastars is regrettably some of its best and memorable features. Why? Because while it is great to see a furry anime trying something new with the jazzy, bouncy soundtrack that this anime so graciously was bestowed with, it's a shame that it's the only thing I find myself very excited about each episode. If you spend the time, manpower, and cum animating a TV show, even with a budget eased by CG, and the only thing people want to buy is the soundtrack, you're going to have to fill your mason jars with something else. The voice acting felt totally fine to me, but to be honest, I only watched this show with subtitles. I can't comment on the English voice acting, but I won't immediately assume that it's terrible. After all, it's not done by post-2007 Funimation. Visuals. I was very surprised to find myself not recoiling at the visuals in this anime nearly as much as I predicted I would have been. Everyone knows that CG rarely turns out well, but Beastars, at least in this aspect, is a rarity on its own. The earthy color scheme and the strange cartoon animal head with totally human body style of this anime also seems far less jarring and painful to watch for 25 minutes than it does when you see still images and clips of the show. I don't really have an explanation for this, and frankly, I'm just as surprised as you are. Overall, I'd have to say that the biggest appeal of Beastars, aside from the slaptastic soundtrack, is obviously the main character, Lugosi, because he's relatable to people who are not like him. I myself tend to be somewhat of a social butterfly, regardless of my high anime diet and hours in Aeropa 4. However, I do sometimes find myself thinking things through in my head in the same amount of excruciating detail as Spectrum Wolf does. And I could easily see how socially inept teenagers with a boring high school or college life might get a lot of wish fulfillment out of this anime. In fact, I'd bet my entire GME gains that the Google Analytics of this anime would show that most of the fans of it are male shonen fans under the age of 25 who have a lot of trouble talking to girls on Discord. Lugosi is the only thing that made this show watchable at all to me. He's a very interesting character, even though it takes too long, in my opinion, to see some of his most interesting scenes. And you can easily go through this entire story inserting yourself into his situations and still empathize with the decisions he makes, even the crazy ones. He alone makes Beastars worth more than the sum of its parts, and it's unclear if this is just the accidental byproduct of screening potential staff or train simulator achievements, or just masterful writing. Personally, I lean towards the former, considering the fact that almost everything else in the show doesn't hold a candle to him, save for the music, which is almost always the work of a contracted professional or the licensing of an existing work. The only thing that even approaches this level of captivation is the school squeak toy, Haru. And to be perfectly honest, she really isn't all that interesting when she's not on screen with her wolf stalker, and is very obviously born of the need to have a will they won't they love interest for Lugosi. Word on the street is that there are some very strange things that happen in the later parts of the Beastars manga and anime, namely that there is a character who just is straight up a snake with no anthropomorphic features whatsoever, and that the characters eventually get Jojo style stands at some point. And I'm afraid that this is where I draw the line. If any of this is true, I just can't see how you could go from season 1 of this show to anything resembling these things and say to your audience with a straight face that you totally haven't run out of ideas. But honestly, if you're enjoying working on something and it makes you rich, who am I a humble and faceless meme farmer, to tell you that you shouldn't keep doing it for as long as you want, especially if you enjoy doing it. As always, an incandescent thank you to the patrons who have faithfully held the line at the Temple of the Sun. Instead of investing in GME tendies, you've graciously provided me with the warmth and love necessary to spout my unwarranted opinions on the internet, in a fashion that barely complies with most websites' terms of service. Sincerely, thank you. It means a lot that anyone has stuck around, even perhaps by accident, through this dry spell of videos. For the foreseeable future, I am going to try and complete at least one video per month on this channel, and perhaps some extra content on my newish second channel, Life Coach Hazen. If things keep going as they've been going, I don't think that will become unmanageable. If you've ever wanted to stare at a horrid, overexposed beast giving you unsolicited life advice, then this is the channel for you. Link in the description. I'm also going to be changing my Patreon over to a per-production model, so that you'll only be charged when I make something, just in case something happens. And current patrons will, of course, be credited on all future Life Coach Hazen videos as a well-earned thank you. Hope to see you all very soon.
Come on.